This is our first session in the study process that will go 9 weeks. You're, of course, invited to attend every night, and then it will build for you. But please come anytime you can. And the list of the topics is in that Wednesday night, Wonderful Wednesday study booklet. Matt Holmes is a psychiatrist in our area who's done a lot of work with a variety of folks, and he has agreed to lead us in these first 3 sessions on medical, psychological, family dimensions of sexuality. So welcome. I think it'd be really good if we could just center ourselves down with a word of prayer. O loving God, presiding over our pasts and futures, our sorrows and our hopes, our fears and our loves, be present in our conversation here to lead us to your wisdom, justice, mercy, and love. In the name of Jesus, our heart and our hope. Amen.
This is a big crowd. It was pretty rowdy earlier.
We'll get rowdy. We'll get rowdy.
I was going to talk about sex at church, but this may go. Okay, so I'm glad to be here. So the plan is that I talk. Can you hear me okay? Now that I'm in the microphone a little better? Okay, good. I would really have to yell otherwise. That we're going to spend, at least these first few times, spend about 20 minutes. We have, what, 40 minutes? Something like that. 45. So I spend part of the time doing a presentation here, and then the rest of the time, hope that we can do some conversation. And I think there are going to be cards for questions as you have them, and that could be a conversation starter. So as he said, I'm Matt Holmes. I'm a psychiatrist. I've been practicing here for about 10 years, and my specialty is working with folks with schizophrenia and addiction. So that's the work I do in community mental health, and I enjoy that work. I kind of feel lucky to be able to do it. So I find myself standing up here now, and I thought a big part of what we're doing is in this process is telling stories and holding that as an important part of things. So I'm going to tell my story. I'm actually going to read my story. I tried to tell it before, but I'm going to go ahead and read it this time. So this is my story, what brought me to the table. In my personal life and in my work as a physician, I have met many gay and lesbian men and women. It is clear to me that sexuality and sexual orientation is not a choice, but a central part of our being that we come to know as we grow into our adolescence and adulthood. I have watched and witnessed, especially in my work as a psychiatrist, their suffering and fear and rejection in our society. I have seen them disowned from families. I'm aware that this is a major part of our nation's problem of bullying. Many have died by suicide, and this continues as a result of this rejection by family and society. It pains me that many Christians and Christian churches are complicit in this suffering. This is not God's direction for us. To cause other suffering is not part of Christ's teaching. I believe the interpretation that homosexuality is a sin is error, as is using verses in the Bible to justify slavery. I was raised a Methodist, and for my faith and spiritual development, I owe so much to this church, my peers, and my mentors. I want my children to have the same opportunity. Our church has so many gifted leaders who provide a safe and loving community for our children to grow. Around college, I drifted away from the church and in the years before I had children. I struggled not with my faith, but around whether to return to a church that has a discriminatory stance towards my gay and lesbian brothers and sisters. How could I participate in an organization that does nothing to stop the pain that so many people I know suffer? After much prayer, meditation, and discussion with those I love, I decided that it was more important to return to my church to give my children the opportunities for growth and faith that I had. But as important to me was to be a part of a movement in Methodism to become a truly welcoming place, as I know Christ wants us to be. I want our children and my children, no matter their sexual identity, to be welcome and to be able to participate fully in the church without fear of judgment, discrimination, and rejection. Ours is God's house. Let our church be a leader in making the United Methodist Church a truly welcoming, open, and loving community of faith. So I'm going to talk for 20 minutes. I'll tell you what's going to happen the 3 weeks that I'm involved with. This first one is just about terms and just a general talk about human sexuality and we've got there it goes. There you go. Do I have enough hands to do it?
That looks good.
Does that look good? Okay. And I'm going to talk about some statistics this first time, talk about some research around sexuality, and talk a little bit about how things changed as far as my discipline view towards sexuality over the years. And then next week I'm going to focus on some of the mental health consequences, I guess you say, of people that are of different sexual identities and sexual orientations as far as mental illness, so depression and suicide and bullying. And Ned's found out it's going to help me talk about homelessness in gay and lesbian youth, which is a new and more concerning thing that's happening. And then the third week we're going to talk about families, kids, relationships, and I have a friend who is bisexual and has been in a relationship with another woman for more than 20 years, and she's going to come tell her story as part of that. We'll talk about some of those other issues. So those are the first 3 weeks. So I'm going to try, there's a lot to talk about, but I'll try my best here. Okay. So let me see what... There's all of us. At least some of us. So we all have a sexual identity. We all have a sexual orientation and a gender identity. But they're all different. We don't wear them as labels. You may not know when you're with people what they are, but we all have something. I'm part of the majority, so I have had help doing this, getting some perspectives from some of my friends to help me with what I'm going to present to you too. So their input has been had. And some of these slides are from Helen, who works with the Reconciling Ministries in Chicago, but represents us, our southeast jurisdiction. So she's helped me with some slides. So it seems, sometimes it seems simple when you're born to mark the box. Is it a boy or a girl? But in reality, for a part of our population, it's really not as clear. And there's a lot of different ways that's not as clear. But I think a lot of us are familiar or comfortable with the terms gay and lesbian. But when the other people sometimes are referred to LGBT or LGBTQ, or that can go on and on, but we don't always talk about some of the other the other parts of the spectrum that people can fall on as far as their sexuality. And so the biggest thing from Helen and from what I've learned, even learning now after what I've been through, is really how many different aspects there are, and how it's really not this or that, but rather a continuum between male and female, I should say. So there's 4 parts of our sexuality in thinking about it. There's our sex, that's our genitals, our physical sex. And so that's part. And so if it's with female genitals, it's going to be a female. And then next is gender identity. So a person's identity, how they view themselves as a man or a woman. And you, in this case, would assume that someone physically a woman would have a gender identity of a woman. I'll talk some about cases where that's not the case in some medical conditions even. And then gender expression is how you express yourself externally, how you dress, behaviors, and how you express yourself socially. And then there's attraction. And for a woman, usually attracted to men. And you can go down the whole list again for men, looking at this or that side, but really all these can happen on a continuum. And there's other ways to look at it. This actually, someone pointed this out to me. This is gender bread person. But it kind of illustrates that in cookie fashion. But that's so that's where we started. Sex, that's genitals, that's how they come out. There's male, there's female, that's intersex, and that's happens in plenty of medical conditions where it's ambiguous as to what it is, and I'll talk more about that. Identity is how you perceive yourself with gender, which can be different, whether or not, whether it's male, female, or intersex. Attraction and expression, I guess you put that line for his dancing, or how well he dances or dresses. And this is another way to look at that, just that it's on a spectrum, and some people can be female but express themselves masculine. I'll show it to you. Like if you draw a line, I'll try as loud as I can. If you draw a line from female physically over to masculine expression, that's what they call transgender. They used to use the word transsexual sometimes, but that's not used so much anymore. And then actually, a woman who's feminine, they call that cisgender. You have a match to where you are, but they have all different, there are all different places on the spectrum where how people identify themselves. Okay. Here's some of I'll just talk a little bit about this, what I like about words, how people might want to be referred to. People would rather be referred to gay or lesbian rather than homosexual oftentimes, because that's part of homosexual sometimes is correlated with the medical research and medical model, where it was talked about for years as a disorder. So that word goes along with that, and people don't tend to like that to be used. And queer, which is something that we wouldn't usually say, we weren't supposed to say, at least anymore, that has been adopted by the younger generation to be an all-encompassing word, meaning that you're part of the minority as far as your orientation, as opposed to straight. I'll talk a little bit about what causes differences in sexual orientation and gender identity. And my work, I spend a lot of time back on this chair with my board, and there's a couch in front of me, and they just say what comes to mind. So I usually blame it on the mother. Actually, we don't. We've made a lot of progress since then, and I don't really have them on the couch. We usually try to stay in 2 seats, and they're at the same height. But actually, there is some maternal part to blame that I'll bring up later, but it's nothing that's their fault. There's a genetic issue. Oh, it just disappeared. Well, that might be all I have, so I'm just going to talk. Okay. All right, this is to talk about summary, kind of a quick summary of the research around sexuality and what leads to someone having different orientations and gender identities. And for years, like Freud, that was true. He did blame the mother, actually overbearing mother and distant father, I think what it was, but that's how they used to. And for years it was classified as a medical disorder in need of therapy or treatment. And that was mainly based on kind of the norms of society and people's assumption around sexual orientation. But it became clearer and clearer that there wasn't empirical data or scientific data to support that it was a disorder in need of treatment. So what's happened because of that, the professions that do mental health and medical treatment, in '73, it was my APA, the American Psychiatric Association, it was no longer a disorder. The next year, I think the Psychological Association and then the World Health Organization, just in 1990, no longer classified it as a disorder. But the consensus now is that it's a normal variation along the spectrum of sexual orientation and identity, not something negative, but just a variation. So I'm going to talk about some conditions. Here's some research pointing towards hormones in the hormone environment for a embryo and a baby as they develop prenatally. So what type of hormones they're exposed to is felt to be some degree related to one's sexual orientation as an adult. And before I go into some of this, they have found that it's not, if you're, as an adult, if you're exposed to different levels of hormones, that's never changed the sexual identity or orientation that was there. But they've got many different ways that it's come back to this is a big reason, potential reason. So I'm going to start with something called congenital adrenal hypoplasia. That's the medical term. They go CAH. It's when during development there is less androgens hormone in the developing fetus baby, and the androgens early on are what cause, if they're there, which androgen goes to testosterone, if that's there between weeks 6 and 12 of development, then a baby will develop male sexual organs, penis, prostate, testes. If it's not there, or they're low, not at the levels for male, then they develop normal female body parts. In this condition, CAH, that often genitals end up ambiguous in that when the baby is born, it's not easy to clearly judge if it's a boy or a girl. In the women, oftentimes the clitoris is enlarged and other tissues are enlarged, and that there's all degrees of that. By history, they used to do surgery right away and raise most of them as women, but found out there were big problems problems with that as far as people's identity later on, and people's sexual functioning later on. So they don't do that anymore and approach it conservatively and take a real different approach. But so that's the explanation of development. In this condition, in adults with this condition, adult women, 30% of them identify same-sex attraction for orientation versus 4 to 10% in the normal population. And so that's one big example of a condition where it appears that there's a role played by hormones and biology. And I didn't mention, but their estimates are 4 to 10% in the general population, men and women, have the same sex orientation. So there's some other things. There's a few more, and I think I could talk a little more, about 5 more minutes or so. This is the most reliable evidence for nature versus nurture. It looks like most things have genetic and a nurture component, but this is another part of the nurture, or the nature component, biologic component. But gay men who have older brothers, so a family with 3 all-brother siblings, each brother, so you take the youngest, each older brother that youngest one has a 33% higher chance of having a same-sex attraction. So if a person, a youngest brother has 2 older brothers, he has 2 times 33% chance of having that. So that's repeated across studies. And so that's really the most reliable and evidence of a genetic component. Now, in regards to twin studies, when you've got fraternal twins and identical twins. Everybody know that the fraternal are 2 eggs split in the embryonic development, and then did I say, no, that was, I said that wrong. Identicals where the egg splits and it's all the same gene, same 1 egg, 1 sperm. The other is 2 eggs, 2 sperm, is fraternal. So in fraternal twins, of 2 boys, if 1 boy is gay, then, hold on a minute, 15% chance, if the one fraternal twin is gay, a boy, 15% chance that his twin will be as well. In identical twins, if 1 twin is gay, the likelihood of that brother being gay reaches 65%. So that I think a few more things I can talk about. Here's where mom might be in trouble again, but nothing she did. But sexual orientation in men appears to be inherited through the maternal or matriarchal gene line. So a gay male will be much more likely to have cousins, aunts, men, well, not aunts, but cousins, uncles, who are also same-sex attracted, and that's all on the mother's side. So that's part, and I mainly wanted to go through some of the biological mechanisms. So there's a little word on treatment, the treatments that have been tried for treating homosexuality as a disorder. That there's still people that do try it, but even before it was declassified as an illness. But the data is clear that they call it reparative therapy, or therapy to try to change a person back to opposite sex attraction, is that it doesn't work, but worse, that it oftentimes can leave folks with a worsening in their self-esteem, a lot of guilt around their sexuality, as well as more depression and suicidality, so thoughts of suicide. I'm not sure so much about actual suicides, but that's what, so with the major medical organizations have no one will recommend against referring or don't support that treatment. So Ned, well, some folks wanted me to cover this. There is a very common belief that I'm going to compare it to some other beliefs. So over the ages, there's persecuted minorities. So if you look back in the Middle Ages, there was a time where Jews were accused of sacrificing Christian babies. America, black men were accused of lynching and sometimes, or accused of raping white women and were lynched or killed oftentimes. And now gay people are portrayed as being a threat to children. That's the main misconception or something that's not true, but is very common, a very common belief. But that's never played out in research data. It's just never played out that pedophilia is any part of homosexuality. So I just wanted, they asked me to bring that up, that sometimes you don't remember. In my business, you take things on assumption, but you're, so that, I think that's about all I have today.
Well, that's the presentation.
Yeah.
Now it's up to you to help, move things along in terms of your interests. And Matt, you just kind of.
And I might sit down with everybody.